This is the Second Studio, hosted by the Design and Architecture Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Borderonay. This week it's the two of us, just the two of us, in a casual conversation.
It's been a while, I feel like, right?
I think it's been a while since we've done an after hours. Yeah.
People are probably like, what's going on? No more after hours. No. There's always going to be after hours.
It's interesting because we get messages fairly frequently from people saying
they love
that
those.
they actually, like, these are some of their favorite recordings. Because we're just...
Well, there is no expectation. So you don't really know where the conversation is going to go, I feel like. So.
The bar is set very low for these conversations. But the thing is... Oh, okay. Sponsors. Designers and architects, if you're looking for a powerful, real-time visualization and VR tool, then check out Enscape. Enscape is super easy to use because it's a plugin and not a standalone application, which means you can directly work in your SketchUp, ArchiCAD, Rhino, Vectorworks, or Revit model. In fact, it only takes a couple of clicks from installation to creating your first rendering. Enscape does realistic renderings, 360-degree panoramas and videos, and virtual reality environments. We use Enscape in our office, we love it, and we think you will too. So click the Enscape 3D link in our show notes to learn more. Second Studio Podcast is made possible by the support from Autodesk.
Autodesk has been part of the design conversation since 1982, providing the tools that helps architects around the globe imagine and create beautifully designed, memorable buildings that people love and admire.
Autodesk supports the work of the Second Studio, bringing the architecture community together, sparking curiosity, and leading vibrant interviews with the industry's visionaries and thought leaders.
The Second Studio works hard to carry the architecture conversation forward, and Autodesk is proud to contribute to this podcast. You can learn more about Autodesk by clicking the link in the episode notes.
This is the Second Studio, two of us. Here we go. So the thing is, like, when people first learn about the podcast and they learn that we put out an episode once a week, they think, wow, that's a lot of episodes to do.
It's a lot.
And it's a fair amount of episodes for sure. However, with our show, what's up?
You keep shaking the mic.
Oh, that's because this table, I don't know who decided to go with this table, but it's very loosey-goosey.
Well, look,
it's not stable.
If people want to spend a bit more money, usually you get better stuff.
Cheap clients we are. Cheap clients.
Okay, stop shaking it. There is hot tea on the table.
But it sounds like it's pretty often, right? But with the way the show is structured, we have it's a guest,
you don't
and then
need to
us,
give
and then
all
a guest,
of the,
and then us.
Yeah.
So it's really not that many episodes. It's not that many guests a year, and it's not that many episodes for the two of us. So we have to think about it very carefully. Having said that, we're doing it after hours, which would go against my point of us having to be very careful with what we decide to put out there.
No, but it makes sense. I mean, once in a while you need to get loose, you know?
Yeah. But we used to do a lot more of these, but not so much.
Well, we're in high demand, so there's not enough room for us to exist in this show anymore.
I don't miss doing the after hours as often because it was very common for us to sit down in the studio and say, right, we're going to have a conversation today. What are we going to talk about? And we have nothing to talk about.
No, but you are always so anxious, and I'm always like, let's just improvise. And I would just, bring something in, and just like that, an hour and a half is gone, and boom, recording done.
Yeah, I guess. But we do, in fact, have a topic to talk about this time, because enough life has happened between the previous after hours and this recording, so we actually have something to talk about other than just work things. No, that's not true. It's work-related still, too. But we went to the 2024 IBS conference. It's for the folks that have irritable bowel syndrome. It's a very important condition. We don't have it, but you go to these things to support those who have it. It's a big conference.
It's
70,000 people
IBS.
show up. Yeah. Irritable bowel syndrome. Went to Vegas. It's 70,000 people have this affliction. Don't laugh. It's not funny.
Is it actually how it's called?
Yeah.
The infection?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so silly.
Yeah.
That's poor marketing right there.
No, we went to the International Builders Show.
I wonder how many people in the medical field showed up and were like, what is this? This is not what I was expecting.
You have to be careful with your acronyms.
Yeah, you do.
No, so we went to that and...
Wait, so can you repeat what it stands for?
The International Builders Show, I think, right? Yeah. It's a convention that happens, I guess, once a year, I've learned, and it flips from one location to the next. So this year was in Las Vegas, which was really cool, which is an interesting place. And then next year it's in Florida, and then Vegas and Florida, which I don't know where in Florida, but if it's in Vegas on the west side of the United States, then it's got to be in Miami in Florida, right? It can't be.
I was going to say must be in Miami. I mean, what else is in Florida?
Okay, a little bit rude.
No, but Miami has a lot of, like design events, so I would imagine it's probably there.
True.
But yeah.
That's true. Anyway, so we went to that. For folks who don't know what it is, as I said before, 70,000 people show up, all have...
It's basically a trade show for builders and designers.
Yeah, and there's it's a massive... The convention center at Las Vegas, we can talk about the building itself, it's huge. I've never been to that convention center. And in fact, I hadn't been to Las Vegas since 20 years.
So did it seem bigger?
It seemed...
or smaller?
It seemed...
Well, what do you remember from the last time you went in Vegas 20 years ago? Probably
not a whole... glimpses. I mean, I remember... not a whole lot. But it's an odd thing because, if you've been to a place before, and let's say it left some kind of impression on you architecturally, right?
Right.
And then 20 years go by, and then you visit it again, usually there's some kind of... not nostalgia, but some kind of emotion that takes place because you're becoming reacquainted with a friend, kind of. I didn't have that feeling at all.
Oh, so maybe you didn't make a friend there.
I think it was maybe too long ago. But I will say Vegas this time,
you were so
we've
excited.
talked about Vegas before on the show.
Have we?
Yeah, kind of casually, not as a dedicated topic. And Vegas is obviously something that's talked about fairly often about architects because of the whole kind of kitsch nature of the architecture there. A lot of the hotels are fake copies of things. It's a very weird place architecturally.
Yeah.
Conceptually, it's weird.
It exists in the middle of nowhere.
That as well.
Which to me is the weirdest thing.
So it's talked a lot about in architecture, in schools, and on podcasts and whatever, right? And it's always mostly talked about in kind of a negative light because there's a lot of strange things happening there. And a lot of what it stands for is not what architects would ever try and do.
It's nicknamed the Sin City. Right? It's where you gamble. It's where you go to strip clubs. It's where you do drugs. I mean, it's not where you become a saint, right? Let's just put it that way.
Right. But that has more to do with the social aspects of Las Vegas and the Strip specifically, not even all of Las Vegas.
But I think that's where the negative reputation comes from.
Oh, I'm talking about the negative architectural reputation.
Oh, well... I mean, the place is like the Disneyland, so it makes sense that the architecture are representative of that.
Yes. So, despite it always the architecture of the Strip being spoken about in a kind of a negative way, like I was describing most often, when I was there this time, I felt nothing but joy. I thought it was so cool.
Well, okay.
Weird.
To put things in context, you're a SoCal kid who grew up next to Walt Disney, who used to like Disneyland, who used to go there fairly often as a kid, probably. So you love theme park. So I think anyone who loves theme park, I would imagine that they would like Vegas in one way or the other.
But you didn't like Vegas?
Okay.
I don't mean the trip. I mean, the architecture of
the first time I went, no.
Closed-minded
I thought it was... No, I thought it was really gross in all the ways.
Okay. We'll expand on it. Gross in what ways? It was cleaner this time, cleanliness-wise.
Well, and I think it has to do with how you feel about the place. Like when I went last and for the first time, it was 15 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know.
A little bit less, maybe than 15 years ago. And I remember the streets to be trashy. I remember people to be super trashy. It's just, everything just felt
trashy.
Like cheesy and trashy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have no idea. I mean, I guess if you like to gamble, that's why you would come there. But I was like, what else would you come here for? Like this, it's not a place where I want to stay.
But what about, the sets, the architecture?
Well, as a French born and raised, this is everything that would give me itches, because it lacks. There's no authenticity in a way. In a way, it's very authentic because it's authentic to what it is, which is a place of
which is inauthentic
entertainment, and unauthenticity. So in that case, it is. But the replication of things, I have like phone and whatever, I have like big problems with those things. So if you make a city like that, like it's just, it's just not going to go well for me.
That's how you felt 15 years ago?
That's what I felt 15 years ago. And this time around, I mean, I still feel the same about replicas in general, and it goes for any kind of replicas. But the city was cleaner. So it did make me feel a little bit better.
Okay.
I think when I went for the first time, I was probably expecting to see another typical city. And I was expecting and
typical city.
And probably judging it as what a city is. But when I came back this time, it was clear to me that it's not a city. It's an adult theme park.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, be an immigrant in a country you don't know and then try to understand everything.
Oh, I wouldn't be so judgy of other people's architecture.
Oh, you would.
I would be.
Oh, you would.
But
you would you would shit on like old buildings that lasted centuries. So
I would go around with my bad architecture sticker and I'd slap it on the wall. So I think the point about authentic and inauthentic is a good one. And I think we've said before on here that one of all architects that are good ones and bad ones, even anyone that's trying to be a good architect and produce great architecture, everyone's trying to find some level of truth and honesty in their work. And again, that can be said about any creative person. That's really, if you talk to a songwriter, a filmmaker, a dancer, anybody, it's all about finding the honest expression of oneself, and then the other variables, if you're not just an artist but you're an architect, you have other things involved with the site and the client or whatever. It's about that. And it's the same thing as saying you're trying to create something that's extremely authentic to, in our case as architects, to the place, the people, the clients, the program, all of that stuff, the time that we exist, and ourselves as the people who are designing the thing. And that's why, as you said, Vegas gets a bad rap, because it's the opposite. It's inauthentic. It's a facsimile. It's a copy, right? However, this discussion reminds me, when I was in grad school, I was in a seminar class, and the teacher was saying very fervently that how do I put it? That every design you create should be different from the previous, because it's supposed to be specific again and honest to all the different variables of each project. And every project has different variables, different clients, different people, different climate, different location, all that stuff. And she said it in a way where that's a fact, period. There's no discussion. That is what it is and should be. And I think most architects listening would say, I agree with that. I do not agree with that, because there are times when it makes perfect sense to create the same exact architecture and repeat it 100 times. Fast food restaurants are a great example. Fast food restaurants you wouldn't think about as being premier architecture. I get that. I'm not saying they're the utmost, pristine, fantastic architecture of our times, but there is a time and a place to just have something that's a copy of something else, because that is the point of the thing. So
I know, but it's pretty weird.
I know.
I mean, you go to any suburb in California, and every mall looks the same. It's extremely confusing. I get the point, but
But here's the distinction, right? It's about the intent of the mission. So
yeah, but I get it, but at some point you also have to judge the concept or the intent and actually question if it makes sense or if it's a good idea.
But okay, fine. That's also true that there's two levels to any critique. There's the judging of the idea and judging of the execution, right? If I own In-N-Out and I hire an architect to design me an In-N-Out restaurant, let's say it's the first or second one, and they design something completely different, I'd say that's ridiculous. I want something that's identical to the previous, in which case I don't need a new design, or something very similar to the previous, just make it fit on this new site, right? You cannot say as an architect, well, that's bad architecture, because that's not what architecture is. No, architecture is a response to the problem. And the problem in the case of a privately owned company is branding. and it's replicating the same thing over and over again. So it's perfectly valid. It is perfectly valid. In the case of Vegas, it's a little bit different because it's not In-N-Out.
I mean, it's perfectly valid, but if the problem is wrong to start with, then the solution, therefore, is wrong too. I mean,
but do you think that Vegas
like
is wrong?
Food, like In-N-Out could have the same floor plan and be the same inside, but if the exterior could at least resonate with the place it's being built in, I think that would make a little more sense.
I don't think it does. What sense for who?
For the built environment of a place.
But that is not In-N-Out's concern.
But, and why should In-N-Out be allowed to not have that concern?
Because it's a privately owned company and they want to
And so is a lot of homes out there, right?
Say again?
And so is a lot of homes out there. And people are still concerned about like how things look. And how
no,
they
but it's
look.
different, right? Because if you have a company and you sell a product and you want more people to buy your products and you want them to
and I'm saying I don't think that should be the case. I think they should be as responsible. If they sell Prada, In-N-Out, or tires, I think they should all be responsible in the way they think about the architecture of where they sell those things.
Well, how does it even work?
I think
in this case, like In-N-Out's always in a suburban setting. So what like negative impact is it having on suburbia?
Okay, well, maybe In-N-Out should question this. Should it be in a suburban setting?
As opposed to an urban setting? Like what does that mean?
As opposed to, does it need to be in a mall area? Can it be somewhere else? I mean, the problem is that all of these places refuse to question things. They've just been applying the same stuff for years without questioning or bringing any sort of evolution. And I think that's what the problem is with this type of concept model or mission. Is that they lock the problem in and then you repeat it 1,000 times for 100 years and you never question it, you never look at it. And I don't think that is architecture.
No, but it's not architecture in its entirety, but it is a portion of architecture. Like there has to be room in the definition of what is valid architecture for things like In-N-Out, I think. I'm trying to think of another example other than In-N-Out.
I mean, we went to the Southwest last year.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Well, I don't know where it was. If it was Tucson or I think it was Sedona. Well, Starbucks and Walmart and like whatever chain was trying to blend in the space where they were bringing their brands, right? And I think that makes sense to me. And you still know it's Starbucks. They still have the logo above it. Does it need to be like like the same facade everywhere? No, people are not that dumb.
Yeah, I get. So it's a little bit different, right? Because I'm actually trying to think now the exterior, like the facade or the building design of In-N-Outs, and whether or not they are actually identical.
They are.
They're pretty much the same, right?
Same material palette.
Same everything, right?
Yeah.
But Starbucks and other companies, they tend to have much more variation in the design of their buildings. I mean, Starbucks is really more of an interior fit out than anything else, too. I don't know. I have to think about it more. I don't feel comfortable saying that every building that is produced and owned by a private company who has a brand and their sole existence is to sell product should always be different from one place to the next. I don't see how that is valid.
I mean, look, if it's beautiful, maybe it doesn't, but most of the time they're not.
Okay, so well, that's a different thing then, right? Oh, sure. I mean, we could talk about the beauty of an In-N-Out, which are not attractive buildings at all. But there's something about that strict definition which it makes me feel uneasy. I don't really believe in general in like what do you call it? Sort of like ultimatums in a sense. Or like this must be what all architecture is. I don't know. I think there's room for variety. I wouldn't suggest that the majority of architecture should be executed in the way that In-N-Out does their buildings in terms of replication, or even like 10% of architecture. No, it's a very specific situation where I think it seems to make sense given all the variables involved. And you could say as an architect, why disagree with that? Well, then you're not going to be the architect for In-N-Out. That's all that is.
Yeah, don't call me. I won't design your In-N-Out. Because you already have the design anyway, so you don't need me.
Well, okay, let's say they approached you and said, we want you to design a new one, and this same design is going to be populated all over the wherever In-N-Out's located.
I won't do that.
You won't do it?
No.
Fuck, man, I'll do it.
Yeah, and you become an In-N-Out populator. I mean, like, okay, what? Well, great value, great contribution. I want my In-N-Out to last for 500 years.
Okay, but that's okay. I'm not saying it's going to last 500 years. I'm not saying it is in all buildings the same way. But it's part of the brief that's given to you.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like trying to jump on that and jump around a little bit. Thinking back about Vegas, what was, in retrospective, interesting to me...
Did I win the In-N-Out argument? Is that what happened?
No, I want it. We'll let the listeners vote and let us know.
They're going to side with you.
Of course.
No one wants to side with the person who's siding for In-N-Out. Because it's not cool.
Yeah, no, if you're Shake Shack, I would, but that's a whole other debate.
Okay, but here's the thing, though. Okay, so let's say...
Shake Shack is as guilty. All of the chain brands, they're guilty. They're all guilty of just having.
But where does it end, right? Should the logo also change every time?
I don't know. Again, if it's tasteful,
Okay, if it's a great logo, right? Are you saying that and it's a big fat logo that's on the side of a building? Should it not change every time to suit the environment that it's in?
It could. Sure, it could. I think that's not a thought to, ignore. I think it must be considered. That doesn't have to, but it must be considered.
Anyone who's in the branding and marketing realm of things is listening to thinking like that's mental. Like you wouldn't do that. Although I do think that would be a cool idea.
Actually, you would probably be the first one who actually does that.
Don't give away the good ideas.
It would probably be a great idea.
Yeah, I know that. But that's what I'm saying. Like, where does it end? Why is not the building considered part of the brand? It is part of the brand. They're paying for it. It's a big marketing symbol. Why not have the building be expressive of the brand?
Yeah, well,
I won!
No. It is expressive of the brand, and the problem with those brands is those really low brand look like shit. Okay, yeah. If you look at like luxury store, like I don't know, the Prada store in Tokyo, well, it's very much representative of the brand. It's a design building. It's expensive. It's unique. Like they nailed it. And I'm not saying that Walmart needs to look like the Prada store from Tokyo, but maybe we could do a bit better. Like.
Okay.
I mean, I understand the branding. Like it needs to represent who it's targeting and all of that, but also. Again, can we just elevate and make things a little bit nicer for everybody? Well, do people who shop at Walmart want to feel like they shop at the shittiest store in town?
We know the story behind the eBay logo, right?
No.
Well, I don't know if this is true or not, but I had heard it from somebody that the eBay logo, if you know what it looks like, it's just like a very generic.
I've been around,
it looks like getting a little testy over there because you're on the verge of losing the argument. I can feel it.
No, I want it.
So the eBay logo is very dumb. It looks like it was designed within 2 minutes
like an
on an
ABC
old
logo.
Computer from the mid 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
Apparently, though, that was intentional.
Yeah,
and I guess yes, of course.
Well, of course, they had a marketing person who designed the logo, right?
No, it's intentional. It intentionally looks like it could have been done very cheaply because eBay is all about finding a good deal. So if their logo was something really fancy, refined, and sharp, and like all the stuff that most logos want to be, it wouldn't make sense. So they intentionally designed a logo that looked basically kind of shitty and cheap because that's what they were about. Not shitty, but they're about being cheap, finding a good deal.
Yeah, I understand. That's what marketing is about. But I'm just saying, maybe there is room to change.
Yeah, I know.
But anyway, the thing I wanted to say was what's interesting about Vegas, thinking about it now that we're back and kind of like reflecting on the time there, is that, as we were walking down the streets and we looked at the facade of like New York, and all of that, like somebody, like I fell for the person who had to do the drawings for that building because despite being a cartoonish building, despite being it's not a caricature of a place. Yeah. That's basically what it is, right?
What it is, yeah.
Well, somebody still had to figure it out and draw it and model it and build it, right? So I have some respect for whoever did that. But the other thing that, made me think about is that it's actually an interesting thing when you're standing and looking at those buildings because they're real buildings. It's not like Disneyland where only the first floor is real and there is nothing else above, like it's all fake windows. Like this is a real building. but it's making you question the seriousness of the built environment we live in. And I'm kind of like going against what I was preaching for before, right?
Yeah. No, but I agree.
It's kind of like Vegas is almost making fun of our society, like ourselves and our society in a way. Like, why do things have to be the way they are? And that's like, one of my favorite things is like, why do we have to do things the way we've always been doing things? And why everybody has silently agreed to follow that way of thinking and considering everything, right? So it is a very interesting place because it's almost like kind of like the majority wins, right? All of the cities are thinking in the same way, and Vegas is kind of like the anomaly place. Therefore, not more of those are going to exist probably, right? Because everybody is like, well, what is this place? This is not,
I would love to see a floor plan of New York, New York. So anyone who's not familiar should Google it, but it's a hotel, right? So in Vegas, there's all these major hotels, and all the hotels have casinos. And the hotels, a lot of them are themed to be just copies of other places. So you have New York, New York, which is of New York City. You have Camelot or Excalibur, I forget what it is. I think Excalibur, which is like a medieval kind of thing. You have Caesar's Palace, Paris, which has an Eiffel Tower, a small Eiffel Tower. Quite large, though. It's not like a small... It's like they built a small Eiffel Tower.
Probably all stucco.
What else was there? There's some others that I'm forgetting about now. Huh?
The Venetian.
The Venetian, right? And you're right, though. Like, these are serious buildings. They're not just fake sets made of, like, exterior or something. They're buildings.
I mean, we're looking at the fountain in front of the Bellagio.
Yeah. It's impressive.
It's like a lake. It's probably 4 inches deep, but
still impressive.
Like the scale of it. And it's interesting because those are probably the older building, but the newer resorts that were built on the Strip, like the tilting towers and whatever, the Aria, whatever it's called. I think these buildings fail because they are taking themselves too seriously in a context of a Strip where everything is very cartoony.
I would keep it going, man. If I were to do a new hotel, let's do a I don't know, a Tokyo hotel or something. Like, who cares? That's what it is already. The Strip at this point, And
but
the Strip
if you're going to build on
but
the Strip, I feel like again, like it's the character of that street is the cartoony facade and aspect and concept. And as much as I have my rubbing against faux things, like again, if that's the concept, then.
The thing that I resonate, so there's a few things. I assume that the New York hotel that has all the different towers crammed against each other, those must be actual hotel rooms. They're not empty, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a crazy thing to design.
Yeah.
That someone designed like 12 different facades in a floor plan that would look like something a student project with a bunch of shifted boxes at different angles and stuff. I mean, that's really cool, forgetting the fact that it looks like New York. But, I mean, if you look at it just as a formal kind of idea, it's like that's like amazing and expensive. So here's the thing that I think people should appreciate about all these things in Las Vegas is that they're owned by casinos or big hotel chains, so that's kind of the dark side of the world. But somebody, even if it is a casino or a hotel, they spent a shit ton of money to create these things, and they didn't need to. They could have said, well, we're going to do the typical generic, the Hyatt or the, not Walmart, but like the generic box, whatever American suburban kind of thing, and just put a bunch of hotels here, and that's going to be the Strip, and we'll have casinos, and they'll come in because we have casinos. No. For whatever reason, they decided all to like recreate all these spaces and spend like legitimately a lot of money. Like someone had to design, draw, and detail the inside of the Bellagio and all of its crazy classical, pseudo-classical moldings, and someone had to build it. So as fake as it is, because it's a copy in terms of styles and designs, it is a real building. It's there, and in terms of the money, effort, design, or drawing set, let's assume, construction and detailing, it's more impressive than 99.9% of the architecture that exists in the United States, for sure. So, in a sense, it's like you might disagree with, the premise of it, but the execution, way better than anything else. I would much rather be in Vegas than in an average like suburban place in the United States, because at least they're doing something.
Right.
At least something happened. I also agree. When I was there, I had the same feeling that you were kind of expressing, which was, I like how you put it, sort of like a mirror to society. But it made me think that why don't we have more just like fantasy architecture? I don't mean fantasy in terms of we're recreating, Game of Thrones architecture, like copying things, but fantasy isn't like, why don't we have more architecture when you look at it, it makes you stop in your place, feel different, and your jaw drops and you think to yourself, whoa, and you're in awe of the space.
I think too,
it's in awe for a very different reason than saying like the Notre Dame, but still, it's like,
no, but
this is crazy.
But and if there is a country where this should happen, it would be in the United States, because there isn't the heavy weight of architecture, history, and preservation and heritage and this and that. Although the country is aging, as the years are going to go by, the country is going to get older, and some of that's going to remain.
We'll see how long we last.
But it's almost like, like why isn't there more of that? I mean, it is the country where Walt Disney and Disney was invented. Like it is where most of the movies in the world come from, right? It is the land where imagination is only the limit of things. So it's kind of sad, because when you look at Vegas, for example, and then you look at suburban homes here, it's like, what the fuck happened?
I know.
I
mean, again, there's this obsession that we have, I think, the United States, but also a lot of like modern places. We have this obsession with efficiency. We fucking love for efficiency.
To money.
It's just efficiency and time, money, effort, everything more efficient. At some point, it's like, why?
To die faster.
Like efficient to what end?
Yeah.
Unless that efficiency gains you the time, the space, and the money and the effort to produce something of quality, then it's efficiency just for efficiency's sake. It's stupid. It's pointless. It's better to spend 3 times the amount of time and money and whatever else on something and produce something that actually has meaning to you, rather than be done in a third of the time but then have no meaning.
Yeah.
That's a completely pointless life to live. But it is, and that's how I feel. And that's everything that we see now is just about being more efficient. It drives me up the wall.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not the key to happiness also. You know what I mean? And I'm one to speak because I'm super happy.
I think it's a disguised key to happiness. I think someone came up with this concept and seduced everybody, because you're right, you're efficient, so you're going to save time, so you're going to have more time. But more time to do what?
To be more efficient with the next more efficient thing.
I know. It's dumb.
Now, the thing about why don't we produce more architecture that's fantastical or fantasy architecture. And when I say fantasy architecture, I mean architecture that when you look at it and you're in it, it causes you to dream. The dreams are not clear, but it causes you to dream. It causes you to think that there's this other way that we could live and to do things. It's fantasy. Here's the thing, is that is relatively easy to achieve. It's very easy to achieve in terms of design, because you just copy stuff that already has embedded within it fantasy. Camelot, or Excalibur, the hotel, right? Looks like Camelot and medieval stuff. Embedded fantasy. New York. It's a real place.
Yeah.
But because of the fact that this is a copy of it, and they've reproduced, the West Village inside of a casino, it therefore becomes fantasy. So the feeling of fantasy comes from the fact that, yes, this is incredible architecture in terms of the amount of effort that went into it, but the majority of the feeling of fantasy comes from the fact that it's being powered by a very specific vocabulary and a copying of that, right?
Yeah.
And so the question is, can a contemporary architecture, an architecture that's not copying stuff, but is suitable for these times, an expression of these times. Can a contemporary architecture and a language of architecture produce the feeling of fantasy? It can, but that's the thing. That's extremely difficult to do, and there's only a handful of examples in any given decade that get to that level. And those are the buildings where we see in the publications and affect all the architects. And all the architects love them when they visit those places because it's achieved that.
But I feel like fantasy, oftentimes, you're right, like refers to something you kind of know.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking like, well, actually, if you think about Star Wars movie, right?
Oh, God, I got to see that.
When they first came out, like, well, I'm not an expert in movie history, but I would imagine that at some point somebody came up with the fantasy world of living on other planets and what that would look like, right? Mm-hmm. There is one guy or one woman at some point who figured they're going to be wearing robes and have giant hoodies and have like tiny little giggly monsters that follow them, and the aliens are going to have a zillion teeth, and like that's a fantastic world that someone came up with because it's being replicated within the genre of those movies or those TV shows, right? Mm. So it came from somewhere. It came from probably especially in Star Wars, like the merging of nomadic population from Africa with like more DIY MacGyver robots. It's kind of like a patchwork of different things, but you don't necessarily perceive those different things like you would see the Eiffel Tower at the Paris Hotel, as bluntly as what they are and where they came from, because it's been merged in a way that it's actually been designed. Like those elements have been taken from different places and different peoples and culture have been put together by somebody's brain and mind, and created that new fantasy world.
Yes.
Versus Vegas, which is just a literal copy, a caricature copy of something that exists.
So but maybe there's three levels of copyingness, or I mean, what I would call it. Well, it's different. I mean, there's the direct copy, right? Which obviously the hotels in Vegas are not a direct copy because they're not the same scale, but it's basically a copy.
The Spanish mansion in LA or the French chateau.
Well, so there's the copy approach. Yeah. Then there's Vegas, let's say. Then after that there is, in music you would call it quoting, which is where you take like a lick from like a musician and you use that in your own improvisation. And so you're quoting, which I always felt was a nice way of saying copying, but you're quoting. And then there is the Star Wars movie sci-fi thing. And the interesting thing with like sci-fi movies is that none of them can truly be ultra sci-fi because it would be too strange for anyone to comprehend, to understand. So movies have this requirement to tap into the emotion of the viewers and to have significance and meaning to the viewer, which means you need to understand what the viewer is thinking. I know a lot of movie makers say, well, I just do what I want to do. Well, no, that's not entirely true. Like, if you were to create a sci-fi movie that took place on an alien planet, but nothing in that movie had anything to do with how humans work at all, it wouldn't make any sense to anybody. So there's always this, like, we have to kind of borrow bits and pieces or layers of certain other things because those carry certain emotions, like the robes, like the robots, like the this and the, I don't know, whatever else it would be, right? It's a whole mixture of all these different pieces that end up creating a new thing, but also is very clearly you're quoting or taking bits from other cultures to make this. We don't really do that in architecture so much. In contemporary architecture, there's much more of a just abandoning of all previous abandoning of all previous languages and gestures that have emotions tied to it. And that's also where I've always thought postmodernism was sort of an interesting thing, because one of the things it was doing, in my view, was it didn't shy away from the history of architecture. It instead, it embraced it. It said, we're going to use what has been done in the past and kind of like quote from it or take bits from it, or do you leverage it in a way because that has an impact on people? If this type of architecture with this detailing, that style has meaning to people internally, right or wrong, doesn't matter. It makes them feel a certain way. Why should we not leverage some of those things, like in the Star Wars movie, so that it has that emotion? So my architecture has an emotional impact in the way that I want it to. But in contemporary architecture and modern architecture, we don't think that way, right?
Well, it's all about efficiency.
Even when buildings are not about efficiency, we don't quote, as I was saying before, we don't quote stuff. That's not really what us, but also just broadly architects that do modern work. That's not really what we do so much, right? And it's I don't know. It's an odd
but
thing.
At the end of the day, everybody just designs the same kind of stuff. Like nobody is inventing any fantastic world.
Yeah.
You know, like, there is no new Star Wars in architecture at the moment. There is only one, overall genre of architecture. There is a slight variation, but like.
Well, again, there's good architecture and there's bad architecture, right? Regardless of the genre that you're in. It's just that I think it's really hard to produce really cool and good and emotionally impactful architecture when you're not relying on basically symbolism. The robe is symbolic of something. A robot that looks a certain way is symbolic of something. The lightsaber is symbolic of a certain, whatever other things in Star Wars. They're all symbols of something else.
And that's also the difference between, let's say, movies in general and architecture is that a lot of it is about, symbols and